In 1274, the 80 warriors of Tsushima did everything they believed was right. They faced the Mongols head-on. They fought with honor, but honor alone was not enough. They were annihilated. On that day, honor died on the beach. A century and a half later, their descendants faced the same fate. This time, they survived by fighting in a way their ancestors never would have accepted. This is the real story behind Ghost of Tsushima. Though the invading fleet carried 30,000 troops, the idea that the samurai fought them all at once is a myth. At Komoda Beach, the samurai faced a landing party of about 1,000 Mongols. The odds were still 12-1. It was a meat grinder. In Ghost of Tsushima, you can cut down a dozen Mongols and spend resolve to erase any damage. But in 1274, there was no erasing damage. There was only bleeding out and broken bones. The commander, Sosuke Kuni, was 68 years old. This grandpa knew his island would likely be wiped out. If he ran away, his clan's legitimacy would end. Dying in battle was the only way to preserve it. It was a grandfather's desperate gamble, a faint hope that his sacrifice might buy a future for his grandchildren and this island. He was defeated, and the people of Tsushima would remember for 145 years. This is where things get gritty. After the battle, the grandpa's body was dismembered, not by the enemy, but by his own allies. They buried his head and torso separately. Why? To hide his identity. In an age without DNA tests or photos, a head was the only proof of death. The confirmed death of a leader directly impacts the subsequent system of rule. You might think, the Mongols weren't samurai. They wouldn't care about heads. However, this custom originated in China. Neighboring countries commonly imitated Chinese systems to be recognized as civilized nations in the international community. Therefore, it was a reasonable decision for the Japanese to protect their heads from Mongol or Korean soldiers. Now, let's talk about the numbers. 700 men, facing an invading force of 17,000. This is not a legend. This is a historical fact. The battle took place on the same island where the grandpa's descendants would fight again. But this time, the odds were a staggering 25-1. The descendants remembered their ancestors' honor play. They knew it wouldn't work, so they chose a different path. Total guerrilla warfare. This wasn't just a samurai battle. This was the birth of the real Ghosts of Tsushima. So why did this happen? It all started when the Mongol navy was defeated. A power vacuum was created, and the seas became lawless. And into this chaos sailed the Japanese pirates, known as the Wako. But the term Japanese pirates can be a bit misleading. While some of the pirates were Japanese, a historical record from the 16th century states that only 3 out of 10 Wako were Japanese. Their crews were a diverse mix of people from across East Asia. Their activities weren't just about raiding. They would later play a key role in importing firearms to Japan. We know how brutal they were as pirates thanks to sources like the Wako Scrolls, which depict them raiding villages along the Chinese coast. And Tsushima, with its perfect location, became their ideal stronghold. From there, they attacked the Korean peninsula and the Chinese coast. The damage was so severe that it was said no one could live on the coast. But here's where it gets complicated. The line between a pirate and a legitimate naval force was dangerously ambiguous. In fact, it is said that a notorious pirate served as an executive officer in Tsushima. In 1419, the Joseon Kingdom of Korea took action in response to the situation. The king ordered,
Defeat the bandits.
This marked the beginning of the OA invasion, the focus of our story. The kingdom dispatched 17,000 soldiers and 200 ships. They departed from Goje Island on June 19th and reached Tsushima's Ozaki Bay the following day. They sent a letter to the Lord of Tsushima, but received no reply. They begin searching for the bandits. Over the next 9 days, the soldiers burned down 2,000 houses suspected of belonging to pirates. Seeing his people slaughtered, the Lord of Tsushima, So Sadamori, a descendant of the grandpa, made his move. The young lord could only gather a force of 700 at most. To overcome this overwhelming disadvantage of 25-1, they launched a guerrilla campaign. They ambushed and repelled the enemy in the mountains. On June 29th, surprise attacks by civilians followed, forcing the royal army to retreat. In the game, Ghost of Tsushima, Sakai Jin fights alone, but in reality, the ghost was the entire island. Forgotten by the shoguns for centuries, the people of Tsushima knew one truth. No one was coming to save us. We must save ourselves. Then, 2 letters reached the Joseon royal army. One was from the Joseon king of Korea.
Since there are frequent storms in July, avoid staying out at sea for too long. Clearly convey my intentions to all the Japanese.
The king was unaware at this point of the damage his army had sustained from guerrilla attacks. The Lord of Tsushima wrote to the royal army,
We fear your army would stay. We request peace and your withdrawal. Since July is a stormy month, it would be unwise to stay.
Ancient military philosophy, the art of war, teaches that victory lies in knowing when to end a war. This was that moment. A favorable position in an unwinnable battle. The royal army withdrew to the Korean peninsula on July 3rd. News of this clash between the Joseon Kingdom of Korea and Tsushima sent rumors flying through Japan's capital, Kyoto. Whispers of a third Mongol invasion grew, especially since Japan had just cut ties with Ming China. But later negotiations clarified the truth. This was an anti-pirate campaign, not an invasion. And with tensions eased, it was in the diplomatic endgame that Tsushima secured its true victory. Despite Japan's rupture with China, trade with the kingdom continued, and it became Tsushima's monopoly. Furthermore, the kingdom promised Tsushima regular food supplies, shifting its strategy from military subjugation to one of appeasement. Grandpa, are you watching? Your descendants are living strong. On the topic of descendants, a marriage took place in 1931 that was hoped would serve as a bridge between Japan and the Korean peninsula. The groom was 23-year-old Count So Takeyuki, a descendant of the grandpa. He was fluent in foreign languages and later became a university professor. His family had accumulated substantial debt, burdening him. The bride was 19-year-old Princess Lee Dok-hae, a descendant of a Joseon king. Due to her high social standing and rules prohibiting marriage within the clan, she could not find a husband. She also suffered from schizophrenia. Despite their complicated circumstances, their relationship is said to have been a good one. A year after their marriage, their first daughter was born. However, the times would further complicate their lives. Japan annexed Korea in 1910. The Korean royal family becomes Japan's highest nobility. In 1945, Japan lost World War II, and the aristocracy was abolished. In 1955, as the princess's illness worsened, the couple divorced at her family's request. The couple's unimaginably complex origins, turbulent historical backdrop, and notably handsome husband have made them the subject of much speculation to this day. And if you're curious about the wider saga of the Mongol invasions, don't miss Takazaki Suenaga's story, where a single arrow turned a bankrupt samurai into a legend. This series explores how the Mongol Empire, which shaped world history, played out its power all the way at the eastern edge. Every episode uncovers the harsh realities of the battlefield, the cunning tactics, and the strange customs that seem impossible today. Check out the playlist below. Every story ties back to Tsushima, the island where the real ghosts were born.
Help motivate us to make more videos by liking and subscribing. Thank you for watching!